Been a while. Good evening, Council President, members of the council. Honesty and integrity. I want you to think about those words. We all make mistakes. Mistakes can be forgiven, but depending on the circumstances and the person's position, they cannot be forgotten. Saluting a criminal that killed a man with developmental disabilities right after he is convicted of a felony is not a crime, but it is an insult to the people of this community. Many years later, we stand here with a decision of whether or not this city council should confirm this man as the next chief of the SPD. I urge you to reject the confirmation of Craig Meidl as the next chief of the SPD. Forgive, yes. Forget, no. This behavior is unexcusable from a police officer, and much less from a chief. How many criminal cops will he salute as chief? How many criminal cops will he look the other way when they break the law because of their exemplary record with the SPD? Maybe none. But given the actions of Craig Meidl in the Carl Thompson case, do we know for sure it will not happen again? I'm not willing to roll the dice and gamble with the future of the SPD. Council President and members of this council, I hope you're not either. This man did not want the job. He did not apply for the job. And at the finalist interview, if you want to call it an interview, it was mostly a charade, I asked him personally as he was leaving, don't we have anybody in the SPD that can step up? And he told me flat out, he says, nobody really wants it. We got one guy that could, but he doesn't want it either. I now think he was talking about himself. So why would we want someone to be our police chief that didn't want the job, that didn't apply for the job, that didn't interview for the job? And although he may be qualified to do the job, does he have the kind of reputation that we want as a police chief? Someone who stood and saluted a person that killed someone with a disability. I don't think we want that kind of chief. I don't think we're looking for that kind of chief. And I think he's a good cop, and you think he will remain being a good cop, but he cannot be a good chief. Please do not confirm this man as our chief of police. Thank you.
Mr. Valder.
Tonight I'm going to talk about the Health and Exercise Science Department, is what we should call it. 10 days before AutoZen, I threw in all my cards, all my political cards. I could have been, my Stuckert card, my Kinnear card, my Mum card, my Waldorf card, and my Stratton card. And I said, I want to take on the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry is the opposite of health care. It's the opposite of health and exercise science. And what happened when I took on the pharmaceutical industry? I got chemically induced with brain injury. Now, all of you right now, you could get in a car accident and end up at Eastern State, and you could be in a lockdown unit, and you could be tortured too by the pharmaceutical industry. Or, and when you get older, you could be in a lockdown unit. It's true, people in your seats have been in lockdown units. Okay, so I'm chemically induced. What do I do afterwards? I watch a lot of Tour de France and Lance Armstrong, and I get on my bike and I start exercising, and I throw everything in the past, I black everything out, and all of a sudden my brain comes back. So health and exercise science is a good way to recover the brain after chemically induced brain injury. And so we need to think about that, and that would be through Parks and Recreation. So I believe we should hire trainers in the future to work with children and to work with our citizens. You talk about massacres. Why do we have massacres? Maybe people they don't have enough recreation, they aren't trained properly, they don't have personal trainers, and an individual needs 6 miles of exertion per day to be mentally sound and sleep at night. They don't need a bunch of pharmaceutical chemicals with chemically induced brain injury. Now, Nick Saban says God didn't make some people one way and other people another way. He gave individuals choices, and some individuals need help. And so some people are born with disabilities, but I've seen people like Paul who worked with Easter Seals, and I trained with him. I helped him on the equipment, and I've seen, and he has the disability that you'd think he'd never talk, he'd never do anything, but he had arm strength way better than me, and he had a master's degree at Eastern. So I think we need to talk about exercise science, recovery, and our recreational department getting funds rather than FBH and all these chemically induced brain injuries and restraining individuals with disability to give them even worse disabilities. So today, it's stated that
Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
Einstein would not.
I'm cutting you off.
You can cut me off.
All right.
Einstein would be an Eastern
Come
State right now.
on. All right. Now we're to